This is David.
And hi, I'm Rachel, and we're the co-hosts of the Democrats Abroad Blue Vote Cafe podcast.
You can check us out on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
But right now, you're listening to a podcast by the Democrats Abroad's Veterans and Military Families Caucus.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you're enjoying this discussion.
Happy New Year to all of our members in the Democrats Abroad Veterans and Military Families Caucus, or VMF. My name is Michael Ramos, and I'm an Illinois UOCAVA voter, and I'm a U.S. veteran and a military family member who's currently residing in Melbourne, Australia. So right now we're in the middle of a heat wave here, so for folks in the Northern Hemisphere, please feel free to send some of that cool winter weather out my way. All right, so let's see here. It's 2026, and that means it's an election year. So I'd like to quickly highlight the website votefromabroad.org. This is your one-stop shop for registering to vote and requesting your ballots for all of this year. Take advantage of this free service. It's for all U.S. citizens living abroad, including our patriots serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Please utilize the website to ensure that you're federally protected when you're casting your ballot this year, whether it's for the primaries, any special elections that pop up, and for the big one, the general election in November. So moving forward, for this week's VMF podcast episode, we're sharing the stories and experiences of three of our members. First, we have Jessica. Jessica is a Marine Corps veteran and military retiree. She's living in Belgium. And then we hear from Allie. Allie is another Marine Corps veteran. She lives in Spain. And then third, we'll hear from Michelle, a U.S. Army veteran who lives in Italy. So these three warriors discuss their thoughts on living abroad and pursuing the benefits and health care that they've earned from the Department of Veterans Affairs, or the VA. So to kick things off, let's hear from Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica Van Dop de Jesus. I'm a retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel. I served for 24 years from 1997 to 2021. I did a combination of active duty and reserve time, around 12 years active duty, 12 years reserves. And I procrastinated on my VA stuff. And when I left active duty, I felt like I wasn't briefed well enough on the benefits of the VA. And it wasn't communicated that I can get my VA ratings and still serve in the reserves. So I never pursued VA healthcare because for me, my reserve career was very important. So I didn't want to do anything medically that would have jeopardized my reserve career. But then I find out that I had colleagues that had been rated and getting benefits while serving in the reserves. So please make sure that you call the VA, tell them your intentions, and see if you can still serve as a reservist by being VA rated, because that's something that would have helped a lot, especially because after I left active duty, I worked for the federal government, and then I launched my own business, and healthcare was obviously an important thing living in the States. Now I live in Belgium, and I finally, 4 years after being retired, took the time to do my VA claim, and I understand that it can be very overwhelming for me. It was extremely overwhelming. I didn't realize that digging up all my military experience, especially my experiences during my deployment and other mental health factors, the toll that it was going to take on me. So I recommend to be calm, to get help from your family and friends during this time, because I did not expect that I would it would be so heavy on me to the point that I had a hypertensive crisis and I had to go to the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. Thankfully, I was not having a heart attack. But just giving you a heads up that, especially if you're dealing with mental health, it could be a very heavy process, and just be prepared for that. Getting rated abroad was actually pretty straightforward, and I didn't know that I could do all this VA stuff abroad. So I submitted my VA claims application, and my first VSO was not good. And I just want to give you guys a heads up because I was recommended to this person by a friend of a friend. And one of the first things I asked is like, hey, can we hop on a call just so we can talk about what I need to do? Because again, I was completely clueless of what I had to do. And I felt like online didn't offer a lot of information. And this guy was like, no, I don't have time to talk to you. I have so many people that I have to see. And that should have been my first red flag, that this VSO did not take the time to talk to me on the phone and walk me through the process. And in talking to friends, and this is really important, rely on your friends and in your veteran community. And if you don't, seek out organizations like Democrats Abroad Military Caucus. For example, I had a casual conversation with Michael Ramos, and we talked about the VA, and he was the one that connected me with an amazing VSO who, first thing she did was get on the phone with me, and we talked, and she actually really took the time to give me all the details that I needed to get my VA stuff squared away. And I think that the other thing is that it's going to take some time. So for me, it took me around a year to get all my paperwork squared away, to go through all my military records. So just be patient, but don't get discouraged. And when I put in my paperwork, my first VSO also gave me that advice. He was like, just list one condition first. And it was a condition that I didn't even have. I don't know why he was like, just list it. I don't know if he mixed me up with somebody else. But then I find out I have to list all my conditions so I could be seen to obviously get a general CMP. So the second time that I filled out all my conditions, it was like months before I heard to get a test, the CMP test that you have to do. So I would recommend that after a month, if you don't hear about getting a CMP test, call the VA. And it's funny because it's happened to me a few times with appeals that I've called them, and then the next day I have an email about getting a CMP, to getting a test. And it moves pretty quickly. And I have to say that the last few months it has been working pretty quickly. Another recommendation that I would give is to use AI tools. For example, through my work, I have Google Gemini, which doesn't use my private data. So I uploaded my military record, and it identified conditions that I could claim for. And another thing is that there were certain things, especially from the mental health perspective, that I was asked to do statements, and I felt that using AI, it was easier for me to write those statements. So I just put some bullet points, and then I just had to refine the statement instead of having to really sit down and, writing, 2 pages of the things that caused me some trauma during my military time. So I recommend doing that. And I think it's really important for us to get service connected, because some of the injuries that I had 20 years ago are really starting to affect me now, that I'm in my mid to late 40s, almost 50 years old. So please take care of your things now. And even if you have great health insurance, I do in Belgium, there are certain things, for example, therapy. And in Belgium, to get therapy on the public system is really difficult. You really have to wait. You also have that language barrier. So I had to use a private therapist that I was paying out of pocket for. So the foreign program does cover the stuff that you're rated for. So ensure that you also enroll in the foreign medical program so you can get reimbursed for those things that will cost you a bit more, or that you probably want to get private health insurance. And also when you go back home to the States, if you do, you can always be seen in the VA. And one of the things that I learned, for example, I'm based out of Washington, D.C., so I go home once or twice a year. And the VA has mental health drop-in, so you don't even have to make an appointment at the DC VA hospital. You can just drop in and be seen for mental health. So that's really convenient, especially if you're on vacation, to do walk-in if you need it. And especially for women, the VA in DC also has a women's health clinic. And I haven't used it personally, but I think it's pretty cool that they even have services for women in menopause, because sometimes women get ignored from that part of the equation. And I think that especially somebody my age, that I've been reconciling with a lot of the things that happened to me during my time in the military, that this is a great way to be treated, especially during this time when your hormones all over the place and you're also dealing with mental health issues. So I think that's great that the VA is doing that. So all in all, it's going to take you time. I'm going to be realistic, but please, and even if you don't think that you're going to get rated, for example, there were certain things that I was rated on that I never saw a military doctor for, just because of the stigma, especially as an officer. And I was able to get rated for it. So I recommend, even if you saw a civilian doctor, but it was during your time of active duty, just put in the claim, and it's for the VA to deny it. So don't deny yourself of getting health care, and not only health care, but the benefits, educational benefits like your GI Bill. I got my master's using my GI Bill, VA loan. Obviously, that only works back in the States, but you can also do a lot of your educational benefits abroad. So I highly, highly recommend that you go ahead and you do your VA claim, and make sure you use your VA credit or your VA benefits. And thanks again to Michael Ramos, because he was the one that pushed me to go and talk to a good VSO and get my stuff squared away. So wishing you guys all a great 2026, and 2026 is a year that we all get our VA benefits. So,
all right, great. You've just heard from Jessica, a Marine Corps veteran living in Belgium. Thank you to her for giving some great advice, especially on her excellent tip to consider using AI when it comes to helping organize your VA claim. Okay, next we have Allie. Allie talks about her experience moving abroad and registering with the VA's FMP, the Foreign Medical Program. Now let's have a listen to Allie's story.
Hello, everyone. My name is Allie. I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran. I served from 1999 to 2003, based out of Southern California. I recently moved here to Spain about a year and a half ago with my family. Living near the Marine Corps base in Southern California, there was a robust veterans community. I was active in the VFW and a local women's organization geared towards veterans. It feels somewhat isolating, I'll admit, since I moved here to Spain. It's been very hard to reconnect with other veterans and rebuild that community that I once had in Southern California. For the first time since leaving service in 2003, I miss the camaraderie that came with being a veteran. It's something that I wasn't prepared for when I was planning my move abroad. And it takes a lot of work to stay active in the veterans community here in Spain. Even though there is a military base, it's 8 hours from here. So I'm joining Facebook groups and reaching out to other expats. And occasionally I find another veteran and we connect. But it isn't like what it was. And that's something that I've been struggling to deal with since I moved here. Now I want to talk about FMP. FMP is a medical program that is set up for veterans who have moved abroad. Like with most things involved in the federal government, using FMP can be complicated. Reaching out to your local VFW before you move might be a good idea. If you've already moved, FMP does have a toll-free number and email address for questions. I've been able to get a response to my questions via their email within 3 days. They're pretty good about getting back to questions once you submit them. What FMP is mainly geared towards is helping out veterans with service-connected disabilities. I know from my experience, the visa process in Spain, you are required to get private medical insurance. However, a lot of the private medical insurance companies here in Spain will not cover pre-existing conditions. And that's where FMP really comes into focus. For me, I have several disabilities from my time in service that weren't all covered by my private medical insurance that I got for my visa, and I've been leveraging FMP to help me get those treatments and medications covered without lapse. It's important to note that FMP does not replace actual medical insurance. It only covers your rated service-connected disabilities. It will cover those medical appointments, prescriptions, and anything else that is connected to the illness you were rated for. So it's more of a supplement to any insurance you have in the country that you're living in. I found that when applying for reimbursement, that's where things can get really complicated. And like I said before, leveraging their 1-800 number or their email address might be a good idea. There's a separate process for medical professionals seeking payment for services versus the veteran seeking reimbursement for medical services. The doctors I see here in Spain do not participate in the reimbursement process for FMP. It's something that's new to them. They don't see too many U.S. veterans in their practice, so I have been left to seek for reimbursement myself. And just some pitfalls that I found, I originally got denied service because I didn't include a copy of my award letter listing my rated disability and tying it to how it applied to my current request for reimbursement. So it's important to tie those two things together. They won't make that assumption. You can't assume that they will make that leap, that what you're submitting for is for X disability or Y disability. You have to spell it out. It's for this. Here's my award letter. These are my disabilities. And this is for this disability. And here's why. And a letter from your doctor would help with that. But I would make it as simple as possible so that there's no guesswork. Once you leave it up to them, they'll err on the side of caution and deny it, which will only prolong your reimbursement. Processing time can take several months. From what I experienced, I submitted my claim. I didn't hear anything back for 3 months. And from others I've talked to, that was actually quite fast. It can go up to 6 months from what I've been told. So you're not going to be getting reimbursed for any out-of-pocket expenses anytime soon. And that's why it's so important to make sure that the paperwork is done correctly and you've tied everything to your award letter. That way you don't have to resubmit for additional time. Another thing that I experienced was I got denied for the prescription drugs for my service-connected disability. My Spanish doctor prescribed me some medication, and it actually worked better than the medication I was getting from the VA when I was living in the U.S. But it's not FDA approved. And so because it's not FDA approved, FMP denied reimbursement for that medication. I personally decided to eat the cost and pay for it myself out of pocket because it was working better than the medication I was taking before. And to me, that was more important. But if cost is a concern, if your medication is really expensive in the country that you're in, and you need that reimbursement, work with your doctors and make sure that they are prescribing you US FDA approved medication, and that will help with that. There is a list, I believe you can search online. I'm not really sure. Like I said, I was happy with the cost was not a factor for me and the medication was working well. But you will need to get your medication approved through the FDA if you want reimbursement from the country that you're living in. Aside from medical, another benefit for being service-connected is, at least here in Spain, disability compensation that I get for my disabilities isn't taxed here in Spain, nor is it taxed in the US. And that's nice to have some tax-free income to live off of while I'm in this country. It's important to consult tax advisors in the country you're planning on moving to, but this might be a benefit that can help you as you're navigating the new country that you're planning to move to. In closing, I just want to say good luck. I know the move can be a little bit scary, but it really is, for me, been the best thing that's happened for me and my family. I miss some things about the U.S., but for the most part, the lifestyle here is slower, the culture is more open, and I've been able to heal and be happy, and I hope that for everyone listening.
All right. And that was Allie. Some good stuff there. And I'm thankful to her for sharing some of her experiences. The VA's foreign medical program isn't perfect, but as somebody who has used it myself, it does have its advantages for those veterans living abroad and who need health care for their service-connected disabilities. Absolutely. Thanks again, everyone, for having a listen to both Jessica and Allie. At this point, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back so you can hear Michelle's story and her experience with the VA. Stick around.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Women, were you exposed to toxic substances in the military? If so, you may be eligible for extra benefits and care under the PACT Act. The law benefits all veterans of the Vietnam, Gulf War, and post 9/11 eras once exposed to toxic fumes, burn pits, Agent Orange, radiation, and other environmental hazards. VA is aware that for women veterans, such exposure can lead to reproductive cancers like ovarian, cervical, uterine, breast, and others. Many women have served in the armed forces over the years. They shouldn't wait to file claims for all conditions outlined in the PACT Act. Learn more at va.gov/PACT or call 1-800-MY-VA-411.
All right, Michael here again. Thanks for staying with us, and let's dive back in right now. So now let's hear from our third veteran guest for this podcast episode. We have U.S. Army veteran Michelle, who's in Milan, Italy, and she has a unique experience having served in Iraq in combat missions and then getting yanked around when she came home and tried to connect with the VA. Michelle's a deep thinker, so some of that is evident in her audio clip that we're about to play. When someone serves our nation in uniform, please remember that not everyone experiences a quote, rosy active duty time or gets the necessary care from the VA that was promised to them. Often it's a battle, it's a fight. You get deployed abroad and fight, and then you come home and then you have to fight. And a lot of this is unexpected. So, like many of us living abroad, Michelle has experienced racism, sexism, and more negative encounters during her service. But then she got service connected. So let's hear Michelle chat with us.
The fog here in Milan has a way of softening the edges of the world. It wraps around the spires of the Duomo, muffling the clamor of the modern city until it feels like you're walking through a dream or perhaps a memory. Living here amidst the cobblestones and the ghosts of Castello Sforzesco in the distance provides a certain distance, a physical removal from the United States that allows me to see the fraying threads of my homeland with a clarity that only distance can provide. But this gentle Italian mist is a lie. The Iraqi desert still scorches inside me, relentless, reverberating in my bones. I stand before you today not as some romantic expat living la dolce vita in this chaotic Italian city, but as a woman whose soul was ripped apart and left bleeding in Aramati's dust in 2005. I returned from Iraq carrying war's toxic waste inside me, the kind no customs agent can see but every cell in my body cannot forget. I hear mortar fire when others hear silence. I see the dead when others see nothing. And I remember the heart-crushing moment when I realized my country wouldn't just fail to catch me, it would actively push me down for 19 years. When I sought help from VA in early 2006, I didn't find a door. I was slammed into a concrete wall. I endured 19 goddamn years in that labyrinth. 19 years of paper cuts from denial letters. 19 years of bureaucrats looking me dead in the eye while calling me a liar. Women aren't in combat, they said, even as I spit sand from Ramadi out of my mouth during the nightmares that ripped me awake every night. They wanted me to swallow my trauma whole and choke on it quietly so fragile men and their legionnaires of the patriarchy, their pick-me-ass bitch women enforcers, wouldn't have to acknowledge the blood on their hands. You survive rocket-propelled grenades and IEDs only to be executed by paperwork. The institution built to heal you becomes your new enemy, and this one doesn't fight fair or follow the Geneva Conventions. Last September, I stood in Prague's twisted streets, a city where clocks run backward and reality bends. I wrote Roses for Kafka in Prague, with hands still shaking from the aftermath of post-war rage. Franz Kafka didn't just write about bureaucratic nightmares. He prophesized the Veterans Affairs hellscape that I clawed through for almost 2 decades. He foresaw the gut-punch absurdity of bureaucrats in press suits telling me that my combat trauma couldn't exist because I possessed a uterus. Placing stones with roses painted on them at Kafka's grave was somewhat of a primal scream in illustrated flower form. Because in June 2025, the walls protecting the castle finally cracked. After 19 years of being called an emotional woman, an attention seeker, the VA surrendered. 100% total and permanent disability. My war wounds meant nothing. This paper was my true victory. Standing in Prague's shadow, I didn't feel peace. I felt a searing vindication. I'd outlasted them. I survived their maze while carrying the weight of Ramadi's dead on my shoulders. They couldn't kill what war had already tried and failed to destroy. I hadn't just survived their Kafkaesque labyrinth. I had set the whole goddamn maze on fire. And you want to know how it happened? Italian doctors saw all of my injuries and heard all of my stories and simply told the truth. They told my story and shared my physiological exams as they were when VA doctors in the US refused to listen to a word without their prejudices clouding their judgment. Doctors who work in a system of universal healthcare simply did their jobs. That was it. They weren't incentivized by corrupt politicians bucking for-profit healthcare or any of that nonsense. They simply did their jobs objectively, and it speaks volumes on how our systems are set up in the US. But survival isn't some passive endurance through obscurity. It's a goddamn declaration of war against it, a violent seizure of whatever light you can find or create. My resilience wasn't born in the sterile safety of therapy rooms or manufactured in pill bottles. It erupted from canvas and keyboard, bleeding through paint and prose. I didn't just piece together the jagged, razor-edged shards of my trauma. I forged them into weapons of meaning. Standing in Basel's galleries, surrounded by the audacity of the avant-garde, I had my revelation. We don't just curate our existence. We rip it from the jaws of despair and rebuild it with our bare, bloodied hands. Art didn't just help me reclaim my narrative, it armed me. Quixote and Ramadi wasn't just some quaint literary allusion. It was my battle cry against the white supremacists who wore our nation's uniform in Baghdad while they desecrated everything it stands for. The Desert Warrior wasn't just some navel-gazing memoir. It was a canteen for the long stretch of road I still had yet to run. Yet, even as I clutch my hard-won victory, a bone-deep chill slices through me That has nothing to do with Milan's winter. It's the ice-cold knife of betrayal. While I was laying roses for Kafka in Prague, triumph in hand, the vultures were circling back home. They're dismembering the system that finally, fucking finally, acknowledged my sacrifice, tearing it apart with surgical precision. From across an ocean, I watch in rage as they execute the architects of our care. They didn't just fire the directors for women veterans and minority veterans. This was a prequel to public executions. This isn't reorganization, it's a goddamn purge. They're working as hard as they can to erase us, women, minorities, anyone who doesn't fit their star-spangled whitewashed fantasy of what a quote-unquote real veteran looks like through their KKK hooded filter. They're strangling pregnant veterans' healthcare with bureaucratic red tape. They're gutting reproductive rights while waving the same flag we bled for. The Veterans Health Administration isn't being reorganized, it's being butchered on an altar of oligarchy, while the most vulnerable among us hemorrhage in waiting rooms. The echo of absence I wrote about is now a deafening scream. It's the thunderous crash of clinics being demolished. It's a suffocating silence where advocates and minority veterans once stood. It's the violent ripping away of everything veterans like Medgar Evers, Miguel Trujillo, and Lori Paestua fought to protect. Living abroad rips away the comforting lies we tell ourselves about the United States. Here in Italy, it's not perfect, but history bleeds from every stone. Their monuments don't hide their scars, and Holocaust markers reflect the gruesome histories around you as you go about your day. Meanwhile, the U.S. is frantically sandblasting its shame away, banning books, including Franz Kafka's The Trial, and crucifying academics who dare speak the truth about our violent origins. They're not just erasing heroes, they're executing our very existence. When they force veterans who are sexually assaulted to carry their attackers' children, when they purge every leader who looks different from the dipshits on Fox News from positions of power, they're committing violence as real as any IED. They're telling minority veterans to die quietly, to bleed patriotically, but for God's sakes, stop demanding equal treatment or any shred of dignity. We survive combat only to be hunted by the very system that sent us to war. This isn't resilience. It's a fucking train wreck in slow motion. So what the hell do we do when the fog doesn't just roll in, but suffocates us? What do we do when the labyrinth doesn't try, but actively devours us whole? We don't just become lantern bearers. We become the flame. We must rip the pen from their delicate, privileged hands before they rewrite us out of existence. My 19-year battle through hell taught me that patience isn't just a weapon. It's a goddamn guillotine blade, and persistence is the executioner. We will not allow the erasure of our combat-scarred stories while these gravy train-riding Trustafarians gorge themselves on our sacrifice, hollowing out our nation's soul to feed their ravenous appetite for gaudy, gold-plated, soulless mediocrity. But more than that, we must be the fire for each other. When they try to extinguish one flame, 10 more must erupt. We don't just hold up lights. We burn down the barriers they've built to keep us invisible and to keep us apart. And listen closely. We must become our own sacred fire. Not just tending our light, but unleashing it. Because half measures are what got us here. Bleeding out while bureaucrats debate our right to exist. I demand you to look beyond the sanitized headlines to the war being waged against us all. See the silent chambers where advocates once stood. Witness the policies strangling women and marginalized veterans who have had their bodies and minds shattered. While spilling blood on foreign soul, marginalized veterans are being violated again by Kremlin puppeteer policy butchers who are slaughtering our rights to healthcare benefits and basic fucking dignity we purchased with our bodies and our sanity. To my battle-scarred siblings, don't just write your stories. Carve them into national consciousness. Don't just paint your pain. Splash it across their pristine walls. Transform your trauma into a weapon they cannot disarm. Your voice is not just for sounding off. It's for demolishing the structures of oppression. Remember, your oath wasn't a suggestion. It was a blood contract to defend the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, even the ones wearing American flag pins while they gut us from within while taking cues from Moscow. They will not edit us out of our own existence. I refuse to watch these goose-stepping parasites use our Constitution as toilet paper while wrapping themselves in our flag. To every general and admiral sitting in air-conditioned offices, your silence is complicity. History is watching. Your inaction is betrayal. When your grandchildren ask you where you stood while your fellow veterans were being erased, what the hell will you tell them? This isn't just a call to action, it's a battle cry. Don't just gripe on social media. Get your ass up and vote, push back, and stand your ground. Bullies don't react to strongly worded letters or signs. They fold when you respond with greater strength. Every vote, every protest, every refusal to disappear quietly is an act of war against this erasure. To our so-called allies, look at us, please, witness this. A nation that cannibalizes its defenders has lost its soul. As I scattered my stone roses in Prague, I screamed my truth on canvas in Basel, I breathe exile in Milan. But my rage, my beautiful righteous rage, remains with me wherever I go. Fighting with teeth bared for the justice they keep trying to steal from our sacred battle-worn hands. And with all of that said, you can clearly see that 2026 is already a shit show. So get your ass registered to vote if you're not already. And if you're an overseas voter, send in your ballot request form for the 2026 elections at votefromabroad.org.
Hey folks, this is Michael Ramos again. Just wrapping things up. Powerful stuff, right? No doubt. On behalf of the VMF Caucus, I'd just like to say a huge thank you for listening to this episode with our 3 guest speakers. If you're a veteran living abroad and you're thinking about getting service connected through the VA, hopefully the stories that you heard here will give you some insight on navigating the process and understanding the VA a little better. On a side note, please do contact us if you'd like to hear a future episode on a similar topic. For example, do you want us to chat more specifically on getting service connected, or learning about the VA's foreign medical program, or registering with VA healthcare, or getting a VA ID card, or maybe seeking out help from someone who's accredited by the VA, or really just anything else pertaining to the VA? If you'd like to hear more of our members' experiences, we'd like to know that too. Just go ahead and drop us a note at veteranscaucus@democratsabroad.org, and we'll see if we can make it happen. Okay. All right. That's it for this episode. Thanks so much again to our guests, Jessica, Allie, and Michelle, for providing their insights. And thank you to our VMF members who always support and advocate for our veterans and military-connected community. Thanks, guys.
In my legs! In my legs! Pain! In my back! In my back!